How we going, folks? Welcome back to the Nightmare Cabin. You'll have to excuse the glare, I'm afraid. This time of day, it can't be helped. Hopefully the camera will find some setting where it can settle on. But yeah. Anyway, we're doing an album review. And today we are talking about the new album from the almighty Nile. This is The Underworld Awaits Us All. This is the band's 10th studio album, which is very impressive. I realised as well, Nile have never done a live album, which is surprising because they tour hard. Like whenever they do a tour, it's always like 50 shows in a row. They do, punishing tours. And there's plenty of live material on YouTube and whatnot, especially festival material. But yeah, just an observation. There's never been a live album. We've got 3 solo albums from Carl Sanders though, and it's kind of him expanding on the sort of more ambient Middle Eastern music. But yeah, after quite an achievement, really. If this is your first video, by the way, very early in the channel, I did a retrospective on Nile. So I do retrospective videos where I go through a band's entire back catalogue. Yeah, quite a while ago now, I did do a Nile retrospective. And I did send it to Carl Sanders, and he did approve. So there you go. I've been lucky to interview Carl twice now. And yeah, it's I even managed to get him to do an album by album preview as well. I can't remember if that was on the podcast it was interviewed for, or if it was for Metal Legion magazine. I'll have to have a rummage round, and if so, I'll link that particular issue of Metal Legion into the description below. But the retrospective video that I did is in the description below anyway. So yeah, let's get on with the review then. I can't believe it's been 5 years since the last album, Vile. I can't pronounce that word. Vile Nilotic is it? Nilotic Rights, yeah. And so that was mainly Brad Paris was on bass for that one, and that was the first album with Brian Kingsland on vocals and guitar. Obviously, that was a big deal because he replaced Dallas. What's his name? Dallas. Let's quickly look him up. Hold up. Dallas Toller Wade. There you go. Yeah, and obviously Dallas was in the band for 20 odd years and did 7 studio albums. So Brian did have a bit of a task filling those shoes, but he did it. Seemingly seamlessly, but I do highly recommend as well his previous band, Enfion. They did one album, Priests of Annihilation. Slightly more black metal, like leaning into it a bit more, but yeah, technical death metal with a bit of melody here and there. Yeah, phenomenal album if you're a fan of Brian and you like what he's done so far with Nile. So he's back for this album, and we've got a new bass player on this one as well. Just quickly get through the lineup. So yeah, got a new bass player, Dan Vadim Von, and Zach Jeter on guitar and vocals also. Now Zach has been the live guitarist for Morbid Angel since 2017, I believe. No, forgive me. Zach Jeter is actually in Letrus Nocturne and what's the other band? Hideous Divinity. So he's on vocals and guitar, and the bass player, I do beg your pardon, Dan Vadim Von, he's the guy that's been playing guitar for Morbid Angel since 2017. So swap that round. But so yeah, we've got 2 new members, and I think Brian Kingsland has played guitar, done vocals, and wrote some of the music, contributed to some of the songs. Most notably, he wrote the closing song, which is an instrumental, which we'll get to when we go through the songs. But he can't tour the band anymore. So Zach is also playing on the album, but he will be the touring vocalist and guitarist, as well as Dan Vadim Von, who, yeah, guitarist in Morbid Angel, but bass player in Nile, but he plays bass on this album. Right. Apart from that, Carl Sanders, the sole remaining original member, godfather of Nile, is obviously, and George Collius In my opinion, the greatest drummer in the world today, especially in metal, and yes, that includes Gene Hoglan. Might be controversial, but there it is. Name me a drummer that's better than George Collius. The guy just gets better and better, and he is absolutely on fire on this album. So what? Yeah, where are we then with the music? I would say, I mean, on the first initial couple of listens, this isn't anything that you haven't heard from Nile before. It's Nile being Nile, and I would have the first couple of listens, I was like, they're maintaining a standard rather than reaching a new standard. But the more I've listened to it, and especially when I just listen to it now, I just listened to it all the way through. It's grown on me a hell of a lot more, and yeah, I think the formula of what makes Nile hasn't really evolved, but this is Nile being Nile, but a very good example of it. So rather than evolves the band's sound and just kind of maintains a standard, I would say this as a 10th album solidifies the standard and is kind of like a bookmark for Nile's career. And yeah, long may it continue. But if this, God forbid, this did happen to be the last Nile album, this is a solid ending to it. But we won't get into that because I'm sure the band have got plenty more albums left in them. The artwork is awesome. As always as well, you get terrific artwork, but also you get these liner notes from Kyle where he just goes totally in depth into what the songs are about, how they were written. So it's always worth reading along when you're listening to the album, and you get that with every Nile album. And yeah, so I was looking at some reviews whilst listening to this today, and as per usual, it's the same stuff. Everyone just says the same old crap. I mean, there are so many rubbish reviewers out there. But yeah, it's the best album since Annihilation of the Wicked. Yeah, they say that every album, and it's always as if the albums between that and this never happened. So it's not the best album since Annihilation of the Wicked. It's the best album since Vile Nilotic Rites. And I think that album was a new sort of threshold for the band, because I think Brian coming into the band kind of gave the band a new lease of life, and he gave them a shot in the arm, because I think their relationship with Dallas had come basically just ran its course, and I think the last album before it, Cole said himself that album was a bit of a strain, and yeah, I think this album just carries on from where that last album left off, really. The first half of the album is kind of familiar enough territory, really. You've got, everything that you're expecting from Nile. Stele of Vultures is a good album opener. It's about just over 6 minutes, but it builds things up and sets the scene. Then you've got the scorching chapter for not being hung upside down on a stake in the underworld and made to eat feces by the four apes. I think this deserves album of the year for that song title alone. A nice short blasting song. It's just, again, classic Nile. Then straight after that you get another song that's not even 2 minutes, To Strike with the Secret Fang, and then build back up again with Nakada 2 Enter the Golden Age, and that's kind of like marks the first half of the album. So you got two sort of fairly long songs with these nice three short blasts in the middle. Nile have always known how to sequence their albums nicely with contrasting like long songs and then short sort of blasty songs. And yet, pretty much the first 5 songs are good, and we're in familiar enough territory, but then the album sort of split in half by a 1.5-minute instrumental called the Pentagrammathion. There you go. Pentagrammathion of Nefran Kar, and that is a instrumental just by Kyle. Nice and melodic and mellow, nice and ambient. Something that would have been on his solo albums, and it just splits the album in half nicely. It just gives you a nice little palate cleanser. Then things kick in with the Overlords of the Black Earth. With this song, you get some choral, like orchestral vocals. I thought it was women that were doing the vocals, so I was looking into it. And no, the guest session is just... oh no, Right, these weren't here yesterday. This has been added since. Yeah, Jasmine Shepherd, Tiffany Frederick, Ashley Johnson, Jessica Williams, and Michelle Mercado. I think that is. Oh, she does keyboards. But yeah, so you've got some vocals there, and you've got these real sort of epic orchestral vocals that are like scored to a film or part of an opera, and it really adds to the atmosphere of it all. Is it John Facino? Yeah, John Facino as well. He played bass in the band and played on was it Annihilation of the Wicked or the album? No, yeah, he played on Annihilation of the Wicked and has done backing vocals on every album ever since, which I find quite funny. And the original drummer normally turns up, does like some additional percussion or some vocals as well. So as many lineup changes as Nile has gone through, they do seem to be, generally speaking, on good terms with former members. But yeah, that's a nice little touch. After that, you got Under the Curse. Bear with me 1 second. Under the Curse of the One God, another good track. Just under 4 minutes long. It ends with like a sort of tribal beat with some instrument. Kyle's playing some weird instrument that only he knows the name of, but it's got a nice sort of backing, sort of like score to a horror film that's set in Egypt, you know, but The Mummy or something like that. But with a, you know, you've got all these different voices going on, and it's yeah, that sort of closes the last minute or so of the song, which is really cool. Then we've got Doctrine of the Last Things, another good one. That one's actually nice and sludgy. It kicks in as it picks up, and then always reverts back into this nice sludgy riff. The female orchestral vocals are back with that one, and as is always with Nile, you always get the best for last. I find you always get like the most challenging part of a Nile album is normally the last couple of songs. They normally what was the one before Annihilation of the Wicked? That was let's quickly look it up. In the Darkened Shrines, that finished with a was it a 3-part or a 4-part? Yeah, 4-part sort of epic, which was practically impossible to record, and even more impossible to ever do live. But yeah, you normally get that. You normally get some epics at the end, and the more sort of challenging material. And yeah, this closes with 3 epics. Really, you got a 7-minute. True Gods of the Desert, and then over 8.5 minute track, which is the title track that you want, Underworld Awaits Us All. The True Gods starts off with a nice melodic riff with some nice backing drums, builds up nicely into this nice chunky sort of dun, 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 you know, groove, and then it comes back. It always reverts back to that melodic riff in the middle, and it's like just a nice cool melodic dark riff that just breaks things up nicely, and then bang, kicks back into it. And it has a nice clean chorus in it as well. Again, it just adds to the atmosphere of it all. I think True Gods of the Desert, because Nile always, they go right deep into Egyptian history, Egyptian mythology, and so on and so forth, Egyptology, shall we say. And but they always have 1 or 2 songs. They always chuck in a H.P. Lovecraft inspired song as well. And they kind of do overlap at times. But yeah, True Gods of the Desert is the H.P. Lovecraft story. And then, yeah, we finish with... well, we don't finish. Second from last, we have the title track, which is another epic. Nice melodic section around 2 minutes in. And then kicks into this nice chunky sludge. And, yeah, just an overall album closer, really. It brings the album to a real big climax. And it feels... afterwards, the last track, Lament for the Destruction of Time, is actually a 4-minute 50-second instrumental written solely by Brian, and that's a really good song, really good instrumental, and nice and atmospheric. And it says in the notes there that they would just tried adding vocals to it and just nothing works, and they went, let's just keep it as an instrumental, it works fine. So I think the title track is the climax of the album, while Lament for the Destruction of Time is the epilogue, and it just, so that's like the big closer, and then that's just the closing credits. It just lets you go out nicely. And yeah, as per always with Nile, it rewards repeated listens. The finer details reveal themselves with subsequent listens, and yeah, it's just a fantastic addition to a monolith of a back catalogue. As I said in my retrospective, I think Nile, each band, sets a standard and then just pushes death metal forward. And I think Nile was one of those bands that when they came along, new standards were set. And I think Nile really sort of, at the moment, up with Cannibal Corpse. Cannibal Corpse in terms of consistency, but in terms of pushing death metal forward, I think Nile are the kings at the moment. They've replaced Morbid Angel. I mean, Morbid Angel haven't done a great album now in coming up to 25 years, but Nile just keep knocking it out of the park and just pushing forward and pushing themselves technically as musicians and songwriters each time. And a fantastic 10th album, and a great achievement and a great addition to a fantastic catalogue. So yeah, let me know what you think of Nile. Let me know what your favourite song is, what your favourite Nile album is. Are you going to be seeing Nile in London on the 11th of September? And yeah, if you haven't watched it already, have a look in the description and check out my Nile retrospective. And with that, I'll bid you all farewell. Thanks a lot.